I believe the time is right for an international treaty or other legally binding instrument to provide the framework for a more coherent and coordinated response to future epidemics and pandemics.
Some critics say the proposed changes would give the WHO authority and control over healthcare, trade, and other aspects of our lives.
This video is more to the point is, it's my understanding under the present draft of the treaty, from what I've read, the proposed agreement, if ratified, is that there would be this sort of body, I guess it'd be the WHO or some sort of body underneath it, that would set these policies that then these countries would have to just abide by and wouldn't have any real say in. And that leads me to the question, well, then what is this? I mean, it looks to me like colonization by another name. You know?
In governments all over the world, delegates from every corner of the globe are embroiled in tense negotiations over a document that could reshape our world forever. This is no ordinary agreement. It is the World Health Organization's Pandemic Treaty, a pact that promises to revolutionize the way that we approach global health crises. But as the details of this treaty begin to emerge, a sinister truth is revealed. This is no benign attempt to protect public health. It is something far more ominous, something straight out of a dystopian nightmare. As we delve deeper into the dark heart of this treaty, we must ask ourselves, what is the true agenda behind this sweeping global pact? And can we afford to ignore the terrifying implications of what is being proposed? Join me on this journey of discovery as we explore the Pandemic Treaty and attempt to unravel its chilling secrets. If you find my insights valuable, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support can make all the difference. So first, what is the World Health Organization? Well, according to their own website, founded in 1948, WHO is the United Nations agency that connects nations, partners, and people to promote health, keep the world safe, and serve the vulnerable, so everyone, everywhere, can attain the highest level of health. The organization is made up of 194 member states, and is governed by its member states, who are also responsible for implementing health policies in the interest of their people. The WHO is established based on a constitution that outlines the organization's principles, governance structure, and functions. The constitution was adopted by the Internal Health Conference in New York in 1946, signed by representatives of 61 states on July 22, 1946, and entered into force on April 7, 1948. The WHO's original ideals were to serve the health of the people while respecting state sovereignty and the rule of law, people's self-determination, human rights, and conventions, and other acts that countries have joined are also fully respected under Article 3 of the International Health Regulations, which will be respected before any amendments are made. While the Constitution still stands today, that will be fundamentally changed by the two instruments that are in the pipeline following the COVID-19 pandemic, which the WHO labels them as global health and foreign policy initiatives. So how is the World Health Organization set up, and how does it work?
Well, it has something called the World Health Assembly. It meets yearly in Geneva. It's a legislative and supreme decision-making body of the WHO. It elects the Secretary General, the Executive Board, and votes on policy of the WHO. And the current chairperson of the World Health Assembly of the WHO is a gentleman by the name of Harsh Vardhan.
They also do not pay their taxes. According to Article 6 of the Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations, WHO and its staff members are generally exempt from paying taxes on their salaries and emoluments, which are instead subject to a system of internal taxation by the United Nations. Additionally, they may also be exempt from other taxes such as value-added tax, VAT, and custom duties on certain goods and services related to their official functions. WHO members and their families also have diplomatic immunity, which means they are exempt from prosecution in the countries which they are assigned for their work. This immunity is granted to them under the 1946 Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations, of which the WHO is a specialized agency. To better explain the gravity and the seriousness of the situation that we are in, take a listen to Andrew Bridgen explaining the WHO's role in the COVID pandemic and what sinister plots are behind this pandemic treaty.
WHO let us down over COVID with their response. In January 2020, as already been pointed out, they were still telling us that there wasn't person-to-person transmission of the virus. That was wrong. That was wrong. And then they prescribed lockdowns and mass vaccination during a pandemic which drove mutations. The pandemic response by the WHO and the national governments should be a cautionary tale on the impact on citizens of handing power to the state, and should certainly not be a template for going further and faster in terms of signing away rights and liberties. Indeed, the pandemic response was so brutally illustrated. The profit-optimised version of the greater good pursued by the WHO often clashes with children's health. Before I spoke out on the 13th of December with regard to the risks of the experimental mRNA vaccines, the MHRA were looking to authorise the vaccination of children down to the age of 6 months in this country. I'm very grateful that the government listened, and we didn't do that. Indeed, it was then pushed back to people over 50, and after my speech on the 17th of March, I'm delighted that the government now has put it back to only those over 75. That's in a few months, that's a huge difference from we're going to vaccinate everybody, and I think that tells the tale of, if we were all under one rule, we'd be doing exactly the opposite of what this country has individually decided to do. During the pandemic, it took extra powers called the fact that it could define information. It took on a position, and this will be enacted in law and binding in those two new instruments, that the WHO has the ability to say what is disinformation. And when anybody says to you that the science is settled on any issue, I suggest that this House would smell a rat straight away, because science is never settled. There is always open for modification, for new things to be discovered, theses to be refined, and what the WHO is saying is that the WHO will be the arbiter of what the science is, and that cannot be right. It's a bit like someone saying the market's changed. Well, in my experience, it never has. So that is a huge grab of power, and the two instruments, the pandemic treaty and the amendments to the international health regulations, are progressing in parallel. And for those who, I just really worry whether colleagues in this have actually read the treaty, because clearly, you know, when you take out the words "not binding" as an amendment, it then becomes binding. You know, these are binding treaties. If we do nothing, these treaties are binding. They're legally binding across all the nations. They're bringing in an idea called One Health. So, and this then extends the ability of the Director General of the WHO to call a public health emergency of international concern, which incidentally is abbreviated to FAKE. So, and it says that he can bring it in on suspicion, the risk of an international incident. It doesn't even have to be about a pathogen that's affecting humans. It can affect animals. He's taking the powers because of the environment, or an increase in the levels of CO2. I suggest that honourable and right honourable members read the treaty. It's just a massive extension of powers, and at the drop of a hat, one man, Mr. Tedros, can call for massive powers to the WHO, and not only will he call when he takes the powers, he will decide when the pandemic or the emergency is over, and when he'll possibly give us the powers back to this House, where elected representatives are supposed to be representing the interests of our constituents. Well, that will all be suspended. And I would, while we're talking about Mr. Tedros, I mean, I would just remind the House that this gentleman who will be deciding the fate of the world, it will be within his gift to call these emergencies. It's acceptable. Also, these new treaties, they compress the time for governments of mandatory reporting lines of 72 hours from when a risk to public health has to be reported to the WHO, and he'll make a decision. This is far too little time for any research, any meaningful research to be done as to what the real risk is, and it will lead to lots of potential for false alarms and unnecessary disruption. These are huge powers that these two instruments would seek to take away from this Parliament and every other Parliament around the world, and they need to be considered very, very strongly. Sticking your head in the sand isn't going to do. It won't do for my constituents.
So who was behind all of this, and who was funding it? According to the WHO's program budget of 2020-2021, 80% of its funding comes from voluntary contributions, which include external sources such as member states, private donors, and other organizations. The remaining 20% of the funding comes from assessed contributions, which are basically fees paid by member states based on their respective gross national income. Therefore, it can be said that a significant portion of the WHO's funding comes from external sources. The World Health Organization's second largest donor is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with only Germany contributing more. Additionally, the Gavi Alliance is the fifth largest donor. Gavi Alliance, formerly known as the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, and according to its own website, is a public-private partnership that aims to enhance vaccine access in low-income countries. It was established in 2000 and is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland, with funding coming from governments, private entities, and philanthropic organizations. These are also some of the biggest investors into pharmaceuticals and the experimental mRNA technology that proved so profitable for those who proposed and produced it during the last pandemic.
It'd be foolish not to see that the big pharmaceutical giants with their lobbying power, they have huge influence over the direction of the WHO, and like many multinational corporations, their size and scale supersedes even national governments. With over 80% of the WHO three-year budget now specified funding, and they have the ability to direct policy.
In 2021, the Indian Medical Association, the Indian version of the PMA, and the largest association of doctors in India, issued a statement objecting to Dr. Harsh Vardhan, who was endorsing Coronil, a product that was being made in India. The IMA questioned the ethics of the health minister, Dr. Vardhan, who was the health minister of India at the time, because he released a fabricated and unscientific product onto the people of India. He has since gone on to become chairperson of the WHA and will preside over this new treaty, which will sit before every government in the world. Given that he resigned from the cabinet in India over that controversy, how in the world has he been entrusted with greater responsibility? It seems that he has failed upwards, like so many at the WHO and the WHA. Not only that, but there have also been sexual scandals within the World Health Organization's own employees.
The WHO in the recent Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 83 individuals who are working for the WHO sexually abused local women, and including the sexual assault of a 13-year-old girl, and it was all covered up, Mr. Sharma, and in a leaked document from the WHO, which would have been in front of Mr. Tedros's committee, a confidential UN report submitted to the WHO last month concluded that the manager's handling of the case didn't violate WHO sexual exploitation policies because the woman concerned was not a beneficiary of WHO aid since she didn't receive any humanitarian support. That is completely unacceptable. If that's the rules of an organisation, they'll be deciding whether my constituents are locked down for 6 months, 3 months, and whether they can go and see their granny. I don't think it's acceptable.
The World Health Organization's pandemic treaty, touted as a global health initiative, appears to be shrouded in secrecy and cloaked in intrigue. As we've delved deeper into its details, a sinister truth has emerged. This treaty may have far-reaching implications that could reshape our world in ways that we can never imagine. The WHO, with its vast powers and exemptions from taxes and legal prosecution, has been criticized for its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and its prescription of lockdowns and mass vaccinations that drove mutations. The WHO's pursuit of the profit-optimized version of the greater good, often at the expense of individual rights and liberties, has raised concerns about the true agenda behind the pandemic treaty. One of the most alarming aspects of the treaty is the WHO's ability to define what is considered disinformation, giving it the power to control information and potentially silence dissenting voices. This challenges the notion of scientific openness and the ability to question and refine scientific theories. As the treaty seeks to expand the WHO's authority and influence, it raises questions about the erosion of a national sovereignty and the potential concentration of power in the hands of a single organization. As we navigate the complex landscape of the global health governance, it is crucial to critically examine the implications of the pandemic treaty and other similar initiatives. While protecting public health is undoubtedly important, it must not come at the cost of fundamental human rights, democratic principles, and the sovereignty of nations. As citizens, it is our responsibility to be vigilant, informed, and engaged in the decisions that shape our world, and to hold international organizations accountable for their actions. Only through careful consideration, transparency, and respect for individual freedoms can we ensure that global health policies are truly in the best interests of all humanity.